Did you work at McDonald's or Burger King before this? The laughter erupted from 3 Navy SEALs seated at the mahogany bar of Seahawk Tavern, as Emma Wells, a blonde-haired waitress with her hair pulled into a neat bun, carefully set down a tray of beers. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, each glass placed with the kind of attention to detail that most people reserved for handling explosives. Blake "Tank" Brooks, his muscles bulging beneath desert camouflage that seemed 2 sizes too small, continued his verbal assault with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. Look at the way she holds that tray. Probably learned it from a YouTube tutorial on how to serve like a pro. His voice carried that particular brand of military arrogance that came from years of being told he was elite, special, untouchable. Emma didn't look at them, her gaze fixed on the condensation rings left by countless glasses on the scarred wooden surface. When she spoke, her voice was steady, unremarkable. Fallujah, 2014. The laughter died like a radio suddenly cut to static. Tyler Mills, barely 25 with the kind of fresh-faced enthusiasm that screamed, new to the teams, let out a low whistle. Wow, another veteran. He made air quotes with his fingers, the gesture dripping with sarcasm. Thousands of people say that line, sweetheart. You're gonna have to do better than that. Blake's wedding ring, a simple gold band that seemed almost fragile next to his trident, clinked against his beer glass as he raised it in mock salute. You know what this symbol means? He tapped the Navy SEAL trident on his chest with his knuckle, the sound sharp and metallic. Only people who've died 3 times get to wear one of these. Emma bent down to wipe the bar, and for just a moment, the sleeve of her gray uniform shirt rode up, revealing something that made the fluorescent lights seem to flicker. A scar, but not just any scar. This one was deliberate, precise, burned into the flesh of her right forearm like a brand. The shape was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. A trident, but inverted, as if someone had pressed the symbol into her skin while it was white hot. What about dying 4 times? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the country music bleeding from the jukebox in the corner. The question hung in the air like smoke from a spent round. Blake's laugh was louder this time, more forced. Die 4 times? Holy cow, then you'd be a ghost. He gestured broadly to his companions, seeking validation. Right, boys. 4 times, and you're definitely haunting someone. Emma's lips curved into what might have been a smile, though it never reached her eyes. Oh, maybe. But none of them realized that in exactly 18 minutes, when a certain ring would be placed beside their drinks, and the base's security system would start screaming alerts they'd never heard before, they would understand exactly who they'd been mocking. And that truth would fundamentally alter everything they thought they knew about real strength. The Seahawk Tavern wasn't just any bar. Nestled deep within Naval Base Coronado, it served as an unofficial sanctuary for the elite warriors who called San Diego home. The walls were decorated with photographs spanning decades. SEAL teams in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen other places that didn't officially exist in any government records. The wood was real mahogany, darkened by years of smoke and stories, and every scratch in its surface told a tale of brotherhood forged in blood and gunpowder. Tonight, the usual crowd filled the space with their particular brand of controlled chaos. Off-duty SEALs clustered around high-top tables, their conversations a mixture of dark humor and technical jargon that would sound like gibberish to civilians. The air carried the scent of beer, leather, and that indefinable smell of men who'd spent their lives jumping out of perfectly good aircraft into very bad situations. Emma moved through this testosterone-charged environment like a shadow, refilling glasses and clearing plates with an efficiency that spoke of muscle memory. She'd been working here for 3 months, and in that time, she'd become part of the furniture, noticed only when something was needed, invisible the rest of the time. Blake Brooks had been coming to the Seahawk for 4 years, ever since he'd earned his Trident and the right to drink among the Brotherhood. At 6'3" and 230 pounds of military-grade muscle, he commanded attention wherever he went. His file listed him as Senior Chief Petty Officer Blake Brooks, but everyone called him Tank, a nickname earned during his 3rd deployment when he'd single-handedly cleared a building complex that was supposed to require a full squad. Tyler Mills was the newest addition to Blake's inner circle, having completed SEAL training just 8 months earlier. Where Blake was all raw power and intimidation, Tyler was energy and enthusiasm barely contained in a regulation haircut and pressed uniform. He hung on Blake's every word like a disciple studying gospel, desperate to prove himself worthy of the trident he wore with pride. The 3rd member of their group was conspicuously absent tonight. Danny Rodriguez was stuck on duty, monitoring communications for a training exercise that had gone longer than expected. This left Blake and Tyler to their own devices, always a dangerous combination when alcohol was involved and someone needed to be reminded of their place in the military hierarchy. "You know what I love about this place?" Blake said, gesturing around the bar with his half-empty bottle. "Everyone here has earned the right to be here. Every single person has bled for their country, sacrificed for something bigger than themselves." His gaze landed on Emma as she cleaned glasses behind the bar. "Well, almost everyone." Tyler followed his stare and nodded sagely, as if Blake had just imparted some profound wisdom. "It's important to maintain standards. You let civilians start infiltrating sacred spaces, pretty soon they'll be everywhere, pretending they understand what we've been through." Emma's hands never paused in their work, but something in her posture shifted, a subtle straightening of her spine that spoke of long-ingrained discipline. Neither SEAL noticed the change, too absorbed in their own rhetoric to pay attention to details. "Exactly," Blake continued, warming to his theme. "Take our waitress here. Probably grew up in some safe suburban neighborhood, never had to worry about anything more dangerous than a paper cut. Now she's here, serving drinks to warriors, probably going home to tell her friends about all the tough military guys she knows." The music from the jukebox shifted to something harder, guitars that seemed to mirror the tension building in the room. Other patrons were beginning to take notice of Blake's raised voice, their own conversations dying down as they tuned in to what was becoming a very public discussion. Madison Reed, the head bartender, glanced over from where she was restocking bottles of premium whiskey. Madison had been working at the Seahawk for 6 years, long enough to recognize the warning signs of trouble brewing. She'd seen this scene play out before. Bored SEALs picking on someone they perceived as weak, alcohol amplifying their natural aggression, until someone said or did something that couldn't be taken back. "Maybe we should dial it back a notch," Madison said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen enough bar fights to know how they started. "Emma's just doing her job." Blake's attention swiveled to Madison like a predator sensing challenge. "And what job is that exactly? Professional pretender? Expert at fooling people into thinking she belongs here?" Emma's cleaning motion paused for just a fraction of a second, so briefly that anyone not watching carefully would have missed it entirely. But Tyler was watching, his young eyes sharp with the hypervigilance that came from months of training designed to notice the smallest details that might mean the difference between life and death. "Did you see that?" Tyler murmured to Blake, his voice low but still carrying across the suddenly quiet bar. "See what?" "The way she moved. When you said that about pretending to belong here." Tyler's brow furrowed as he tried to process what his instincts were telling him. For just a second, she looked like she was calculating something. Blake laughed, but there was an edge to it now. Calculating what? How to best complain to management about customers having opinions. Emma set down her cleaning rag and moved to the next section of the bar, her path taking her closer to where Blake and Tyler sat. As she walked, several of the other patrons noticed something that the two SEALs had missed. Emma's gait wasn't the casual shuffle of a civilian service worker. She moved with her weight slightly forward on the balls of her feet, her hands naturally positioned where they could reach tools or weapons, her head on a constant, subtle swivel that took in every entrance, every face, every potential threat. Hunter Gray, a 20-year Navy veteran who'd seen enough action to recognize a fellow warrior, set down his beer and watched Emma work with growing interest. Hunter had lost his left leg to an IED in Helmand Province, and now worked as a civilian contractor, training new SEALs in urban warfare tactics. His eye for detail had been honed by years of staying alive in places where the wrong assumption got you killed. If you've ever been underestimated or mocked for who you appear to be, this story will hit you right in the heart. Smash that like button right now and subscribe, because these stories of hidden strength need to be heard. And hey, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love connecting with viewers from around the world who understand what it means to be judged by appearances. As Emma reached for a clean glass from the overhead rack, the motion caused her sleeve to ride up again. And this time, Hunter got a clear look at the scar on her forearm. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The burned-in trident wasn't just inverted. It was surrounded by other marks, smaller scars that formed a pattern Hunter recognized from classified briefings he'd attended years earlier. "Holy cow," Hunter whispered, so quietly that only his drinking companion heard him. "What's wrong?" asked Chief Petty Officer Mike Johnson, following Hunter's gaze to where Emma was polishing glassware with mechanical precision. "That scar on her arm. I've seen something like it before." "Where?" Hunter shook his head slowly. "Classified briefing. About 5 years ago. They showed us photos of... Never mind. Probably just a coincidence." But even as he said it, Hunter knew it wasn't a coincidence. The pattern was too specific, too precise. Someone had put those marks there deliberately, and whoever had done it possessed knowledge that was supposed to be buried in files so classified that most generals didn't have clearance to read them. Meanwhile, Blake had decided that Emma's silence was an invitation to escalate his campaign of humiliation. "You know what? I'm curious about something." He stood up from his bar stool, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the bar. "You said Fallujah, 2014. That's pretty specific for someone just throwing out random military references." Emma continued her work, but Tyler noticed that her movements had become even more precise, as if she was conserving energy for something. "Maybe she looked it up on Wikipedia," Tyler suggested, though he sounded less certain than before. "Maybe," Blake agreed, stepping closer to the bar. "Or maybe she figures if she throws around enough military terms, people will buy her story. Problem is, I was in Fallujah in 2014. Second Battle of Fallujah. Operation Phantom Fury follow-up operations. Spent 7 months in that hellhole." For the first time since the conversation started, Emma looked directly at Blake. Her eyes were blue-green, the color of deep ocean water, and there was something in them that made Tyler's trained instincts start screaming warnings. "Grid coordinates 32 SMB 578943, she said quietly. Blake's beer bottle froze halfway to his lips. Those coordinates were burned into his memory, marking the location of a safe house that had saved his life, during the worst firefight of his career. It wasn't information you could find on Wikipedia or in any public database. It was the kind of tactical intelligence that only someone who'd been there, in that specific place at that specific time, would know. "How do you know those coordinates?" Blake's voice had lost its mocking tone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Lucky guess," Emma replied, returning to her cleaning. Tyler was studying Emma with new interest, his mind racing through possibilities. "Those coordinates? They're not in any after-action reports I've seen. How would a civilian know something like that?" Blake's face was flushing red, and not from the alcohol. "She wouldn't. Unless—" He trailed off, unwilling to voice the possibility that was forming in his mind. The bar had gone almost completely silent now, the usual background chatter reduced to whispers as the other patrons sensed drama unfolding. Several people had pulled out their phones, though whether to record potential trouble or call for help wasn't clear. Emma's specialized medical equipment included advanced nerve stabilization technology, originally developed for combat medics operating under extreme stress. The military-grade diagnostic tools she carried featured encrypted data storage and satellite communication capabilities that enabled real-time medical assessment in hostile environments. These ruggedized devices, designed to withstand battlefield conditions, represented cutting-edge medical technology that civilian hospitals were only beginning to adopt. Lieutenant Ashley Kane chose that moment to make her evening rounds, pushing through the heavy oak doors of the Seahawk with the no-nonsense stride of someone accustomed to having her authority respected, without question. Ashley was base security, responsible for ensuring that the various warriors who called Coronado home didn't destroy too much property or each other during their off-duty hours. At 28, Ashley had already built a reputation as someone who could handle the unique challenges that came with policing elite military personnel. She'd broken up fights between Marines and SEALs, mediated disputes between Army Rangers and Air Force Special Operations, and somehow managed to maintain order in an environment where everyone was trained to solve problems with violence. "What's the situation here?" Ashley asked, her hand automatically resting on the radio clipped to her belt. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and something about the atmosphere in the bar was setting off alarm bells in her head. "No situation, Lieutenant," Blake said, though his voice carried an undertone that suggested otherwise. "Just having a conversation with our server here about her military experience." Ashley's gaze shifted to Emma, taking in the woman's calm demeanor despite the obvious tension in the room. "Is there a problem, miss?" "No problem," Emma replied. "Just doing my job." But Ashley's training had taught her to look beyond surface appearances, and what she saw didn't add up. Emma's posture was too controlled, her awareness too acute. These weren't the characteristics of a civilian service worker. They were the ingrained habits of someone with extensive tactical training. "Can I see some identification?" Ashley asked, her tone professional but firm. Emma reached into her apron pocket and produced a California driver's license, handing it over without protest. Ashley examined the ID carefully, noting the address, the issue date, the photograph that matched the woman standing before her. Everything looked normal, legitimate, unremarkable. Except for one detail that made Ashley's pulse quicken. The license was real, but it was too real. Too perfect. The kind of documentation that intelligence agencies produced when they needed someone to have a completely clean, completely unremarkable civilian identity. Ashley had seen similar IDs during her time working with various federal task forces, and they always made her suspicious. "Emma Wells," Ashley read aloud, "says here you live in Oceanside. How long have you been working at the Seahawk?" 3 months, Emma replied. "And before that?" "Various jobs, restaurants mostly." It was the kind of vague answer that raised more questions than it answered, but before Ashley could probe deeper, Tyler interjected, with a question that would change everything. "If you were really in Fallujah, you'd know about the phantom frequencies," Tyler said, his young face earnest with the need to prove his own knowledge. "Radio frequencies that kept showing up on our equipment but weren't supposed to exist. Only people who were actually there would know about that technical glitch." Emma's hands stilled completely, for the first time since the conversation began. When she looked at Tyler, there was something new in her expression. Not fear or confusion, but calculation. "Frequencies 279.4 and 316.8 megahertz, she said quietly. "They weren't a glitch." The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the distant hum of the air conditioning system. Tyler's face went pale, because those specific frequencies were mentioned in exactly one classified after-action report, filed under security protocols so strict that only a handful of people in the entire military had clearance to read it. Blake's beer bottle slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in an explosion of glass and foam that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Those frequencies are classified," he whispered. "Yes," Emma agreed. "They are." Hunter Gray stood up slowly from his table, his prosthetic leg making a slight clicking sound as it locked into position. "I think," he said carefully, "that we might want to reconsider some assumptions we've been making." Ashley's hand moved to her radio, but she hesitated, unsure exactly what she was dealing with. The woman standing behind the bar looked like a perfectly ordinary civilian, but she was discussing classified intelligence with the casual ease of someone who'd not only had access to it, but had been there when it was gathered. "I'm going to need to run a background check," Ashley said, though her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Emma nodded. "Of course, though you might want to use your secure terminal for that search." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Secure terminals were reserved for accessing classified databases, the kind of information that required special clearance and authorization. Ashley found herself wondering why a civilian waitress would know enough to suggest using one. Tyler was still processing what he'd heard, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the intelligence she'd just displayed. "Those frequencies," the report said, "they were being used for coordination between unidentified units, off-the-books operations that didn't officially exist." Emma began cleaning up the broken glass with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else, but Tyler noticed that she cleared a specific pattern around the shards, one that would allow for rapid movement in any direction if the situation turned dangerous. "A lot of operations didn't officially exist," Emma said as she worked. "Doesn't mean they weren't necessary." Blake was staring at her with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle that might get him killed if he got the answer wrong. "Who are you?" he asked bluntly. Emma looked up from the broken glass, and for just a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped. What Blake saw in her eyes made his blood run cold. Not the gaze of a confused civilian, but the flat, assessing stare of someone who'd looked death in the face and walked away. "I'm a waitress," Emma said simply. "That's all I am now." The word "now" carried implications that made everyone in the immediate vicinity suddenly very aware of how isolated they were in this corner of the bar. Ashley's hand tightened on her radio, though she still wasn't sure who she would call or what she would tell them. Madison, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing concern, decided it was time to intervene. "Maybe we should all take a step back," she suggested. "Emma's been nothing but professional since she started working here. Whatever you think you're dealing with, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." But Hunter Gray was shaking his head slowly. "No," he said. "There's not. Not for this. Not for what we just heard." Tyler's mind was racing, connecting dots that formed a picture he didn't want to believe. The phantom frequencies were first documented during Operation Blackwater. But that operation doesn't exist in any official records. It was scrubbed from all databases 5 years ago. Emma's cleaning motion paused for just a fraction of a second, so briefly that most people would have missed it. But Tyler had spent months learning to notice the smallest details, and that tiny hesitation told him everything he needed to know. Operation Blackwater, Tyler continued, his voice growing stronger as pieces fell into place. A joint task force that was supposed to eliminate a high-value target in Syria. 6 operators went in. Only 1 came out. And that one... He trailed off, staring at Emma with dawning recognition. Ashley's radio crackled to life with routine base communications, but the sound made everyone jump as if they'd been shot at. The normal sounds of the bar, clinking glasses, background music, casual conversation, had all but disappeared, leaving them in a bubble of tension that seemed ready to burst at any moment. Emma straightened up, the broken glass cleared away with military efficiency. "You're very well informed for someone so young," she told Tyler. "I read everything I can get my hands on. It's how I learn." Tyler's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly. The survivor from Blackwater was listed as KIA 6 months after extraction. Officially, everyone who went on that mission is dead. Officially, Emma agreed. Blake found his voice, though it came out rougher than usual. "If you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, then you're claiming to be someone who doesn't exist. Someone who died 5 years ago." Emma's smile was sad and tired, and infinitely more dangerous than anything Blake had ever seen. People die all the time. Not all of them stay dead. The philosophical implications of that statement were lost on Ashley, who was trying to process the tactical situation she'd stumbled into. Her training had prepared her for drunk sailors and brawling Marines, not potential encounters with operators from black programs that officially didn't exist. "I need to call this in," Ashley said, reaching for her radio with renewed determination. "Who are you going to call?" Emma asked reasonably. "And what are you going to tell them? That you think the waitress at the Seahawk might be a dead seal?" Ashley's hand froze on the radio. Put like that, it sounded insane, but the evidence of her own senses was telling her that whatever was happening here, it was far beyond anything in her training manual. Tyler was studying Emma's face with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every detail. The lone survivor from Blackwater, codename was Raven, female operator, age classified, service record classified, everything about her was classified. He paused, swallowing hard. Even her real name. "Especially her real name," Emma corrected quietly. Hunter Gray spoke up from his table, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned experience. "I've been watching this whole thing, and I've got to tell you, I've never seen anyone clean up broken glass like that. The pattern, the efficiency, the way she positioned herself for maximum tactical advantage, that's not civilian training." Blake was struggling with cognitive dissonance that threatened to break his brain. Everything he believed about hierarchy and recognition and earning respect was crashing up against evidence that the woman he'd been mocking might outrank everyone in the building. "What, this is insane," Blake muttered. "You're a waitress. You bring me beer and clean tables. You can't be some kind of super soldier from a black ops program." Emma looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Why not? Did you think operators from classified programs had secret badass tattooed on their foreheads? Did you expect them to wear their service records like name tags?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of Blake's assumptions. Of course, covert operators would look ordinary. That was the entire point. Tyler's phone buzzed with an incoming message, and the notification sound seemed unnaturally loud in the charged atmosphere. Without thinking, he glanced at the screen, and what he saw there made his blood freeze. "Holy cow," Tyler whispered, his face going pale. "What is it?" Blake demanded. Tyler held up his phone, showing a text from Danny Rodriguez. "Emergency at base ops. 3 KIA from training accident. All hands report immediately." The irony was brutal. They were debating the existence of someone who might have prevented such accidents, while 3 real people lay dead from exactly the kind of training exercise that Black Ops teams were designed to make safer. Emma's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted in a way that Hunter recognized from his own combat experiences. She was processing the information and calculating response options with the speed and efficiency of someone for whom this kind of decision-making was second nature. "Training accident," Emma said quietly. "What kind of training?" Tyler looked at his phone again, scrolling through follow-up messages. "Live fire exercise. Something went wrong with the range safety protocols." Emma's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Which range?" "Building 7, the urban warfare course." For the first time since the conversation began, Emma showed genuine emotion, a flash of something that might have been anger or grief, or both. "Building 7 has been compromised for 6 months. I filed a report about structural weakness in the observation tower." The words dropped like bombs into the silence. Ashley's training kicked in, and she found herself asking the tactical question. Filed a report with whom? Emma's eyes met hers, and Ashley saw depths there that spoke of responsibilities and knowledge that went far beyond anything a civilian should possess. With people who don't officially exist, investigating problems that don't officially happen. Blake's world was tilting on its axis. "You're saying you've been conducting some kind of investigation? Here, on this base?" "I'm saying that 3 people are dead who shouldn't be dead, and that's not acceptable." The simple statement carried a weight of authority that made everyone in the immediate area stand a little straighter. This wasn't the voice of someone making excuses or deflecting blame. It was the voice of someone who took personal responsibility for outcomes and was prepared to act on that responsibility. Ashley made a decision that would haunt her career for years to come. "I'm going to run that background check now. Full spectrum, classified databases included." Emma nodded. "You should. But Lieutenant, you might want to clear the area first. When those results come back, there are going to be a lot of questions that don't have comfortable answers." Tyler was staring at his phone, watching updates flow in about the training accident. 3 names, 3 families that would be getting visits from notification officers, 3 sets of personal effects that would need to be packed and shipped home, and all of it because safety protocols that should have been updated months ago were still using outdated procedures. "The report you filed," Tyler said slowly, "was it about more than just structural problems?" Emma's silence was answer enough. Blake was fighting a losing battle against evidence that threatened to destroy everything he thought he knew about his place in the military hierarchy. "Let's say, hypothetically, that you are who these guys seem to think you are. Why would you be working as a waitress? Why hide in plain sight like this?" Emma's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because people see what they expect to see. They see a woman in a service uniform, and they assume she's harmless. They see someone cleaning tables, and they think she's beneath their notice. It's the perfect cover for observation and assessment." "Assessment of what?" Ashley demanded. "Of threats to operational security that come from inside the system instead of outside it." The implication hit like a physical blow. Ashley's mind raced through the possibilities: corruption, espionage, black market weapons sales, any number of scenarios that would require the kind of investigation that couldn't be conducted through official channels. Hunter Gray spoke up from his table, his voice carrying the gravitas of hard-won experience. In Afghanistan, we had a saying, "The most dangerous enemy is the one who looks like a friend," but it works both ways. Sometimes the most valuable ally is the one who looks like nobody special. Tyler's phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made him physically recoil. The training accident. Initial investigation suggests equipment failure. Specifically, observation tower collapse during live fire exercise. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, there was steel there that hadn't been visible before. 3 more names for the wall. 3 more families destroyed because someone ignored a safety report. Blake was staring at her with dawning recognition. You're not just investigating security breaches. You're investigating negligence, criminal negligence that gets people killed. Among other things, Ashley's radio crackled with urgent chatter about the training accident, investigators being called in, evidence being secured. But she found herself more interested in the woman standing behind the bar, who seemed to know more about what had happened than anyone who'd been officially briefed. "How did you know about Building 7? Ashley asked. "Who gave you access to conduct that kind of inspection?" Emma's answer was simple and devastating. The same people who are going to want answers when they find out that report was buried in a filing cabinet instead of being acted upon. The words carried implications that extended far beyond the Seahawk Tavern. Someone with enough authority to task a deep-cover operative was going to be very unhappy when they learned that safety recommendations had been ignored, resulting in preventable deaths. Tyler was scrolling through more updates, his face growing paler with each new detail. One of the KIA was Danny Rodriguez. The name hit Blake like a physical blow. Danny had been his partner, his friend, his protégé. They'd served together for 2 years, saved each other's lives more times than either could count. And now Danny was dead, because someone had decided that fixing a structural problem wasn't worth the expense. "Danny," Blake whispered, the fight going out of him completely. Emma's expression softened fractionally. "I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good SEAL. He deserved better." The past tense was like a knife in Blake's chest. "How do you know what kind of SEAL he was? You never met him?" Emma's silence stretched for several heartbeats before she answered. "I know because I've been watching this team for 3 months. I know their strengths, their weaknesses, their potential. Danny Rodriguez was one of the best tactical minds I've observed in years. His loss is going to create gaps that will be difficult to fill." Blake stared at her, processing the implications. "You've been watching us, evaluating us, for 3 months. Among other things." "What other things?" Emma's smile was cold as winter ocean. "Determining which personnel might be compromised, which ones might be selling information to hostile parties, which ones might be taking shortcuts that get people killed." Ashley felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "Are you saying there's a security breach? That someone on this base is actively endangering operations?" "I'm saying that's what I was sent here to find out. And after tonight, I'm beginning to narrow down the possibilities. The comprehensive insurance program covering elite military personnel included specialized liability protection and advanced financial planning services designed for high-risk operational environments. These exclusive financial products offered cryptocurrency investment options and international asset protection that standard civilian policies couldn't provide, ensuring complete financial security for personnel whose careers involved classified operations and extended overseas deployments." Tyler was still processing messages about the training accident, but his mind was also working through the tactical implications of what Emma had revealed. "If you're conducting a security investigation, then everyone on this base is a potential suspect, including us." "Including everyone," Emma confirmed. Blake's grief was transforming into something harder and more dangerous. "Danny's dead, because someone ignored your safety report. I want to know who." Emma studied his face, as if weighing his sincerity against his previous behavior. Wanting to know and being prepared to handle the answer are two different things. "Try me." The report was filed through proper channels 3 months ago. It identified 17 separate safety violations in Building 7, including structural weakness in the observation tower that made it unsuitable for live fire exercises. The report was acknowledged, classified, and then buried. Ashley's training kicked in, and she found herself asking the procedural question, buried by whom? Someone with enough authority to override safety protocols. Someone who decided that budget considerations were more important than SEAL lives. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Blake's hands clenched into fists, and Tyler could see the rage building behind his teammates' eyes. "Give me a name," Blake said, his voice deadly quiet. Emma shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. But when I can, you'll be among the first to know." Hunter Gray had been listening to the entire exchange with growing unease. "Miss, I don't know who you really are or what authority you're operating under. But if what you're saying is true, then this conversation has moved far beyond anything that should be happening in a public bar." Emma nodded. "You're right. It has. Which is why I think it's time to end it." She began moving toward the far end of the bar, and Tyler noticed that her path would take her past 2 different exits while keeping her back to the wall. Even now, in what should have been a safe environment, she was thinking tactically. Ashley's radio erupted with chatter about the training accident, investigators arriving, preliminary casualty reports being filed. But she found herself more concerned with the woman who'd just upended everything she thought she knew about security protocols. "Wait," Ashley called out. "If you're conducting some kind of investigation, I need to know the scope. I need to know who has jurisdiction." Emma paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Lieutenant, there are some questions that are above your clearance level, and some answers that would put you in danger if you knew them." "I can handle danger." Emma's smile was sad and knowing. "I'm sure you can, but the kind of danger I'm talking about doesn't come from enemies outside the wire. It comes from people wearing the same uniform you are." With that, she disappeared through a door marked "Staff Only," leaving behind a bar full of people struggling to process what they'd just experienced. Blake slumped against the bar, his earlier arrogance replaced by grief and confusion. "Danny's dead, and apparently, someone we trust killed him." Tyler was staring at the door through which Emma had vanished. "Who was she?" "Really?" Hunter Gray finished his beer and stood up, his prosthetic leg clicking as he prepared to leave. "Son, I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've learned that sometimes the most important questions are the ones you're not supposed to ask." Ashley was still holding her radio, updates about the training accident crackling through the speaker, but her mind was focused on running that background check, on finding out exactly who Emma Wells really was. "I'm going to get answers," Ashley muttered. Tyler looked at her, his young face serious beyond his years. "Are you sure you want them?" The question hung in the air as the Seahawk slowly returned to normal operation. Other patrons resuming their conversations, the jukebox starting up again. But for the people who'd witnessed Emma's revelation, nothing would ever be quite the same, because they'd learned that heroes didn't always look like heroes. Sometimes they looked like waitresses with scarred arms and tired eyes. Sometimes they spent months cleaning tables and serving drinks while conducting investigations that could save lives or destroy careers. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room was the one everybody ignored. Blake pulled out his phone and scrolled to Danny's contact information, his finger hovering over the call button before he remembered that his friend would never answer again. The grief hit him like a physical blow, doubled by the knowledge that Danny's death had been preventable. "I want to know who killed him," Blake said quietly. Tyler nodded. "So do I. But first, I think we need to figure out who's really on our side." Ashley was already walking toward the door, her radio in hand, and determination in her stride. She had a background check to run and answers to find. What she didn't know was that the search she was about to conduct would trigger security protocols that would bring this entire situation to the attention of people who operated far above her level of authority. Because Emma Wells, whoever she really was, had been telling the truth about one thing. Some secrets were dangerous to know, and some truths were worth dying for. The Seahawk gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations were quieter, more subdued. Word about the training accident was spreading, casting a pall over what should have been a celebration of brotherhood and shared sacrifice. Blake sat alone at the bar, Danny's empty chair beside him serving as a painful reminder of loss. Tyler remained nearby, still processing everything he'd heard and trying to reconcile it with his understanding of how the military actually worked. Madison had resumed her bartending duties, but she kept glancing toward the staff door through which Emma had disappeared. In 6 years of working at the Seahawk, Madison had served everyone from fresh recruits to admirals. She thought she'd developed an eye for reading people, for understanding who belonged in the warrior culture and who was just visiting. Emma had fooled her completely. She was never really a waitress, Madison said quietly. No, Blake agreed. She wasn't. Then what was she? Blake's laugh was harsh and bitter. Someone who knows more about what happened to Danny than anyone who's been officially briefed. Someone who tried to prevent it and got ignored. Tyler was still scrolling through updates on his phone, but his mind was working through tactical implications that went far beyond the immediate tragedy. If she's right about there being security breaches, then we have bigger problems than one training accident. We have enemies inside the wire, Blake agreed. Madison set down the glass she'd been polishing. Enemies? Here? On Coronado? Blake's expression was grim. The most dangerous enemies are the ones wearing friendly uniforms, the ones with clearance and access, and the authority to make decisions that get people killed. Outside the Seahawk, Ashley was walking rapidly toward the security office, her mind racing through protocols and procedures that might give her access to the information she needed. The background check on Emma Wells would be the first step, but Ashley suspected it would raise more questions than it answered. What Ashley didn't know was that, the moment she entered Emma's name into the classified database, automated systems would begin tracking her queries, noting her clearance level, and flagging her access for review by entities that had been monitoring the situation at Coronado for months. Because Emma Wells wasn't the only person operating under false identity on the base, and the investigation she'd been conducting was about to become far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Inside the Seahawk, Tyler's phone buzzed with another message, this one from a number he didn't recognize. The text was brief and cryptic. Building 7 wasn't an accident. Check the duty roster for that day. See who wasn't where they were supposed to be. Tyler stared at the message, his mind racing. Someone was feeding him information, someone who wanted him to ask the right questions. But who? And why? Blake noticed Tyler's expression. What is it? Tyler showed him the message. Someone's trying to help us figure this out. Blake read the text, his jaw tightening. Or someone's trying to manipulate us into looking in the wrong direction. Only one way to find out, Tyler said, pulling up the duty roster database on his phone. What they found there would shatter their faith in the system they'd sworn to defend. because the roster showed several key personnel absent from their assigned duties on the day of the training accident. Personnel who should have been overseeing safety protocols. Personnel who had been pulled away for administrative duties that had no official record. Someone had deliberately created gaps in the safety net. Someone had wanted that training exercise to go wrong, and somewhere in the labyrinthine corridors of Naval Base Coronado, Emma Wells was preparing to take the investigation to its next level. A level that would bring truth to light, no matter how many careers it destroyed in the process. Because 3 good SEALs were dead, and someone was going to pay for that. Ashley's footsteps echoed down the corridor as she made her way to the security office, her radio crackling with ongoing updates about the training accident. 3 body bags. 3 notification officers preparing for the worst part of their jobs. 3 families about to learn that their heroes weren't coming home. But Ashley's mind wasn't on protocol or procedure. It was focused on the woman who just walked away from the most intense conversation of Ashley's career. A woman who somehow knew classified frequencies, grid coordinates, and safety reports that didn't officially exist. The security office was located in Building 3, a nondescript concrete structure that housed the base's most sensitive operations. Ashley's clearance got her through 2 checkpoints, but accessing the classified database would require additional authorization. She settled into the secure terminal, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard as Emma's words echoed in her memory. You might want to use your secure terminal for that search. How had a civilian waitress known that classified searches required secure access? Ashley typed in her credentials and waited for the system to authenticate her clearance level. The screen flickered, displaying options for different database searches. She selected Personnel Background Check, Classified, and entered the name Emma Wells. The system processed for longer than usual, cycling through multiple databases, cross-referencing information that Ashley didn't have clearance to see. When the results finally appeared, they made her blood run cold. Emma Wells, Classification, Restricted Access Background Check. Requires Omega-level clearance. Unauthorized access will be reported to Joint Chiefs. Ashley stared at the screen, her mouth dry. Omega-level clearance was reserved for the highest echelons of military intelligence. She'd never even met anyone who had that kind of access. But Emma Wells, a waitress at the Seahawk Tavern, required that level of authorization just to view her background. Before Ashley could decide what to do next, her secure phone rang. Not her radio, not her regular cell phone, but the encrypted device that was only supposed to be used for emergencies involving national security. Lieutenant Kane, she answered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Lieutenant, this is Commander Wade Stone. I understand you just attempted to access classified personnel records. Ashley's stomach dropped. Commander Stone was the base commander, a man who reported directly to admirals and had been known to make careers disappear with a single phone call. Yes, sir. I was conducting a background check on someone I encountered during my security rounds. Someone named Emma Wells. Yes, sir. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of Ashley's racing heartbeat. Lieutenant, I need you to report to my office immediately. And Kane, don't discuss this with anyone. That's a direct order. The line went dead, leaving Ashley staring at her phone and wondering if she'd just destroyed her career by asking the wrong questions about the right person. Back at the Seahawk, Tyler was still analyzing the duty roster, his mind working through inconsistencies that painted a disturbing picture. Blake sat beside him, grief and rage warring for control of his emotions as the reality of Danny's death sank in. Look at this, Tyler said, pointing to his phone screen. On the day of the training accident, 3 key safety officers were pulled away for what's listed as administrative review. but there's no record of what that review was about, or who authorized it. Blake leaned closer, studying the information. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, and Warrant Officer David Kim. All three should have been overseeing Building 7's safety protocols. And all three were conveniently absent when the tower collapsed. Madison continued cleaning glasses, but she was listening to every word. 6 years of working at the Seahawk had given her an education in military operations that rivaled most college courses, and what she was hearing sounded like deliberate sabotage. "You're talking about conspiracy," Madison said quietly. "About people deliberately getting your friend killed." Blake's hands clenched into fists. "I'm talking about murder." Tyler's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "Check who authorized the administrative review. Follow the paper trail. The truth is in the signatures." Tyler showed the message to Blake. "Someone's really trying to help us." "Or set us up," Blake replied grimly. "At this point, I don't trust anyone in uniform." Hunter Gray had been sitting quietly at his table, nursing his beer and thinking about patterns he'd observed during his 20 years of military service. The conversation he'd witnessed between Emma and the SEALs had triggered memories of other encounters, other people who'd seemed ordinary until circumstances revealed their true nature. "Mind if I join you boys?" Hunter asked, moving to the bar with his distinctive gait. Blake looked up, recognizing the older man as one of the Seahawks regulars. "Sure, though I'm not sure we're much company right now." Hunter settled onto a bar stool, his prosthetic leg clicking as it locked into position. "I've been thinking about your waitress friend, about some things I've seen over the years." "What kind of things?" Tyler asked. "Operations that didn't officially happen, people who died but kept working, missions that got scrubbed from the records because they were too successful or too embarrassing." Hunter's weathered face was serious. "The military's got a lot of ghosts, son. People who did jobs that were too dangerous or too sensitive to acknowledge publicly." Blake's expression hardened. "You think Emma is one of these ghosts?" "I think Emma is exactly what she appeared to be tonight. Someone with knowledge and skills that don't match her cover story. Someone who's been watching and evaluating and waiting for the right moment to act." Tyler was processing this information, connecting it to everything they'd learned. If she's been investigating security breaches for 3 months, then she might know who killed Danny. "She might be the only person who can prove it," Hunter agreed. Madison had stopped pretending to work and was listening openly now. "So what do we do? She disappeared through that staff door, and I have no idea where she went from there." "We wait," Blake said grimly. "Because if she's half the operator I think she is, she'll be back. People like that don't leave missions unfinished." But Emma wasn't coming back to the Seahawk, not tonight. She was 3 buildings away, standing in a secure communications center that officially didn't exist, speaking to people whose names appeared on no organizational charts. "Phoenix Protocol is active," Emma said into the encrypted microphone. "The security breach is confirmed. We have 3 KIA and evidence of deliberate sabotage." The voice that answered her carried the weight of absolute authority. "Understood, Raven. What's your assessment of local personnel?" Emma thought about Blake's grief-fueled rage, Tyler's intelligent questions, Ashley's determination to find answers. "Mixed. Some are compromised, some are naive, some might be useful. I need 48 hours to complete the assessment." "You have 24. The training accident has attracted too much attention. Questions are being asked at levels that make continuing your cover problematic." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of months of careful preparation collapsing around her. "Understood. Initiating extraction protocols." "Negative. You're going active. Full operational authority as of 0000 hours." Clean up this mess, Raven. All of it. The connection terminated, leaving Emma alone with the knowledge that her time as a waitress was over. In less than 6 hours, she would shed the careful disguise she'd maintained for 3 months and become something much more dangerous. But first, she had to survive the night. If you're already getting chills from Emma's quiet confidence, wait until you see what happens next. Hit that notification bell because this story takes a turn that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you don't want to miss the moment when everything clicks. Ashley reached Commander Stone's office in record time, her mind racing through possible explanations for why a routine background check had triggered such a dramatic response. The commander's office was located on the top floor of the administration building, protected by multiple layers of security that reminded visitors exactly who held power on this base. Commander Wade Stone was 53 years old, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much violence to ever look completely at peace. He'd served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several conflicts that didn't appear in any official records. His office walls were covered with photographs spanning 3 decades of military service, but Ashley noticed that certain periods were conspicuously absent from the chronological display. "Sit down, Lieutenant," Stone said without preamble. "We need to discuss what you've stumbled into." Ashley took the offered chair, her posture automatically straightening into perfect military bearing. "Sir, I was conducting a routine background check as part of a security investigation. I didn't realize the subject required special clearance." Stone studied her with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions based on incomplete information. Emma Wells isn't her real name. She's operating under deep cover authority that extends from the Joint Chiefs level. Your background check triggered automated security protocols that brought her mission to my attention. Ashley felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "Her mission, sir?" For the past 3 months, she's been investigating security breaches that have resulted in compromised operations and unnecessary casualties. The training accident that killed 3 SEALs tonight was part of a pattern she's been tracking. The implications hit Ashley like a physical blow. Someone on this base has been deliberately sabotaging operations. Someone with access, authority, and detailed knowledge of our operational security. Someone who's been selling information to hostile parties or eliminating personnel who might expose their activities. Stone's expression was grim. Someone who knew that tonight's training exercise would result in casualties. Ashley's mind raced through the possibilities. "Do we know who?" "We're about to find out. Because you accessing her records just accelerated our timeline considerably." Stone stood up, moving to a secure safe built into the wall behind his desk. "What I'm about to show you is classified beyond your current clearance level, but circumstances require that you be briefed on operational details." He removed a thick folder marked with security classifications Ashley had never seen before. Operation Blackwater, 6 years ago. Joint Task Force sent to eliminate high-value targets in Syria. Mission was compromised from the inside. 5 operators killed, 1 survived but was listed as KIA for operational security reasons. Stone opened the folder, revealing photographs that made Ashley's breath catch. Action shots of elite operators in combat gear, their faces obscured by equipment and shadow. But one photo showed a female operator without her helmet, and the resemblance to Emma Wells was unmistakable. "Commander Raven Cross," Stone continued, "leader of the most successful Black Ops team in modern military history, officially dead for 6 years, actually operating under deep cover, tracking the sources of intelligence leaks that got her team killed." Ashley stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile the images of a hardened warrior with the quiet waitress she'd encountered at the Seahawk. She's been hunting the people who betrayed her team. And she's found them. The same network that compromised Blackwater has been operating here, at Coronado, for years, selling operational intelligence, sabotaging equipment, eliminating personnel who get too close to the truth. Stone's voice carried an edge of barely controlled anger. Tonight's training accident wasn't an accident. It was an execution. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The 3 SEALs who died. They were investigating something. Danny Rodriguez had been asking questions about discrepancies in equipment manifests. Someone decided he was getting too close to answers they didn't want revealed. Ashley felt sick. So they murdered him and made it look like an accident. They tried to, but they didn't count on having a ghost watching their every move. Stone closed the folder and returned it to the safe. Lieutenant, you're about to be read into an operation that officially doesn't exist. You can refuse, and your involvement ends here. But if you accept, you'll be working directly with one of the most dangerous people in the military intelligence community. Ashley didn't hesitate. I accept, sir. Stone nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. Then let's go collect our waitress, because it's time for Commander Cross to stop hiding. Meanwhile, back at the Seahawk, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense as word about the training accident spread through the base. More personnel were arriving, seeking information about friends and colleagues who might have been involved in the exercise. Blake and Tyler had been joined by several other SEALs, all of them processing the loss of Danny Rodriguez and trying to understand how a routine training exercise had gone so catastrophically wrong. The conversation had shifted from speculation about Emma's identity to anger about the safety failures that had killed their teammate. The tower was inspected last month, said Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison, a demolitions expert who'd worked with Danny on multiple operations. Passed with flying colors, according to the official report. Tyler pulled up the inspection records on his phone. Inspector was Chief Warrant Officer David Kim, same guy who was pulled away for administrative review on the day of the accident. Kim's been in charge of Building 7's safety protocols for 2 years, Blake added grimly. If there were structural problems, he would have known about them. Hunter Gray had been listening to the conversation with growing unease. Boys, you're dancing around something that's going to get you killed if you're not careful. You're talking about accusing a senior NCO of criminal negligence or worse. We're talking about murder, Blake said flatly. Then you better have proof that'll stand up in a court-martial, because accusations like that don't just end careers, they end lives. Tyler's phone buzzed with another anonymous message. Check Kim's financial records. Look for deposits that don't match his salary. The money trail will tell the story. Tyler showed the message to the group. Someone really wants us to investigate Kim. Or someone wants us to think Kim is guilty while the real culprit covers their tracks, Hunter warned. Madison had been listening to the entire conversation while serving drinks to the growing crowd of concerned personnel. As the evening progressed, she'd noticed patterns in who was asking what questions, who seemed genuinely surprised by the news of the training accident, and who seemed to already know more than they should. One person in particular had caught her attention, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, one of the 3 safety officers who'd been absent during the training exercise. Mitchell had arrived at the Seahawk 30 minutes after news of the accident broke, ordering drinks and chatting casually with other personnel, as if nothing unusual had happened. But Madison had noticed that Mitchell's conversations seemed designed to gather information rather than share grief. She was asking subtle questions about who else had been scheduled for the training exercise, who might have witnessed the accident, and whether there had been any security investigations related to Building 7. Tyler, Madison said quietly, moving closer to where the SEALs were clustered. Don't look now, but Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is here. She's been asking a lot of questions about tonight's accident. Tyler glanced casually toward the back of the bar, where Mitchell sat at a corner table with two other officers. She's supposed to be one of the safety officers who was pulled away for administrative review. Funny thing about that, Blake said grimly. She doesn't look like someone who just learned that her absence contributed to 3 deaths. Hunter Gray's expression had gone very serious. Boys, I think it's time for you to be somewhere else. This conversation is attracting the wrong kind of attention. But before anyone could move, the lights in the Seahawk flickered and dimmed. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie red shadows across the bar as the main power systems cycled through backup protocols. What the hell? Madison muttered, checking her equipment behind the bar. Tyler's phone showed no signal, and Blake discovered that his radio was receiving only static. Communications are down, Blake reported. Hunter Gray was already moving toward the exit, his prosthetic leg clicking rapidly as he tried to reach the door. But it wouldn't open. The electronic locks had engaged, sealing everyone inside the Seahawk until power was restored, or someone with override authority chose to release them. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice announced over the bar's PA system. Please remain calm. We're experiencing a temporary security lockdown. Normal operations will resume shortly. But the voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, and she was speaking into a handheld radio that somehow still had connectivity when everyone else's communications were dead. Blake's training kicked in, and he found himself automatically assessing the tactical situation. 60-plus personnel trapped in a confined space, communications down, electronic locks engaged, and at least one person with override authority who might not have their best interests at heart. This isn't a power failure, Blake told Tyler grimly. This is a containment operation. Tyler's mind raced through possibilities, all of them bad. Someone's worried about what we might have figured out. They're buying time to clean up loose ends. Madison had ducked behind the bar, her bartender's instincts telling her to seek cover when situations turned dangerous. But she could see Mitchell speaking urgently into her radio, and the words she caught made her blood freeze. Witnesses contained. Proceeding with sterilization protocol. The Advanced Tactical Training Program utilized cutting-edge educational technology and legal consultation services specifically designed for military transition specialists. These comprehensive courses included classified protocol training and legal advisory services that helped veterans navigate complex career transitions while maintaining security clearances and protecting sensitive operational knowledge throughout their civilian integration process. That's when the staff door burst open and Emma Wells stepped into the red-lit chaos of the Seahawk. But she wasn't the quiet waitress anymore. She moved with the fluid precision of a predator, her awareness encompassing every person, every exit, every potential threat in the space. "Everyone get down," Emma commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority that made hardened seals obey without question. Mitchell's head snapped up, her radio frozen halfway to her lips. "You're supposed to be dead." Emma's smile was sharp as a knife. "People keep saying that. I'm starting to take it personally." The confrontation that followed happened so quickly that most witnesses would later struggle to describe the sequence of events. Mitchell reached for the pistol holstered at her hip, but Emma was already moving, crossing the distance between them with inhuman speed. The gun never cleared its holster. Emma's hand closed over Mitchell's wrist with crushing force, applying pressure to nerve points that sent the weapon clattering to the floor. Mitchell tried to break free, but Emma's other hand found the nerve cluster at the base of her neck, applying just enough pressure to drop her opponent without causing permanent damage. "Sterilization protocol cancelled," Emma said into Mitchell's radio. "Raven is active. All units stand down." The response came immediately. "Confirmed, Raven. Lockdown lifted. Emergency teams en route." The electronic locks disengaged with soft clicks, and the main power returned, flooding the Seahawk with normal lighting that seemed blindingly bright after the emergency illumination. But nobody moved, everyone still processing what they'd just witnessed. Emma stood over Mitchell's unconscious form, her posture relaxed but ready for additional threats. When she looked around the room, Blake saw something in her eyes that made everything click into place. The flat, assessing gaze of someone who'd made killing a science and survival an art form. "Holy cow," Tyler whispered. "You really are Ravencross." Emma's attention focused on him like a laser. "You shouldn't know that name." "I read everything I can get my hands on, including classified after-action reports that mentioned a female operator with a 100% mission success rate." Tyler swallowed hard. "You're supposed to be the best of the best." "I was the best," Emma corrected. "Now I'm just tired." Blake was staring at Mitchell's unconscious form. She was going to kill everyone in here. She was going to try. Whether she would have succeeded is debatable. Emma's smile was cold as Arctic wind. But yes, that was the plan. Eliminate witnesses, stage it as a terrorist attack or training accident, clean up all the loose ends. Hunter Gray spoke up from near the door. "How many loose ends are we talking about?" "Everyone who asked questions about tonight's training accident. Everyone who might have connected Danny Rodriguez's death to the intelligence leaks. Everyone who might have threatened the operation they've been running for 6 years. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Blake found himself struggling to process the implications. How many people are involved? More than you'd think, fewer than you'd fear, but enough to make this base a very dangerous place for anyone who asks the right questions. Tyler was studying Emma with new understanding. That's why you were here, not just investigating, hunting. Hunting, Emma confirmed. The people who killed my team, who sold out American operations for money, who turned service into profit and honor into commodity. Yes, I've been hunting them. Madison had emerged from behind the bar, her face pale but determined. What happens now? Before Emma could answer, the Seahawks' doors opened and Commander Stone entered, followed by Ashley Kane and a team of personnel that Blake didn't recognize. They wore military uniforms, but their equipment and bearing marked them as something beyond regular forces. "Raven," Stone said, his voice carrying both relief and resignation. "Status report." Emma gestured toward Mitchell's unconscious form. "One package secured. Network compromised, but not completely neutralized. We'll need full forensic analysis of her communications and financial records." "Already in progress. What about witnesses?" Emma looked around the room at the faces of people who'd witnessed far more than they'd ever intended to see. "That depends on what you want to do with them." Stone's expression was grim. "Some conversations never happened. Some people were never here. Some investigations reach conclusions that satisfy everyone involved." Blake stepped forward, his grief and anger overriding his military discipline. "With respect, sir, Danny Rodriguez is dead because someone sold him out. I'm not forgetting that, and I'm not letting it go." Emma studied Blake's face, seeing something there that spoke to her own need for justice. "Chief Brooks, what if I told you that there was a way to honor your friend's memory while serving your country? A way to make sure this never happens again?" "I'd say I'm listening." Emma reached into her apron pocket and pulled out something that made every seal in the room go rigid with shock. It was a Trident ring, but not just any Trident. This one was worn smooth from years of handling, and the inscription on the inside was clearly visible. R Cross L09. She placed the ring on the bar next to Blake's beer bottle, the metal making a soft clink against the glass. The gesture was simple, but its implications were enormous. Tyler stared at the ring as if it might explode. Leviathan 9, you were the team leader for Operation Leviathan. I am the team leader for Operation Leviathan, Emma corrected. The operation never ended. It just went dark. The moment the ring touched the bar, something extraordinary happened. Hidden sensors throughout the Seahawk detected the unique electromagnetic signature embedded in the metal, and automated systems that had been dormant for months suddenly came to life. Security monitors throughout the base flickered, displaying a message that made duty officers reach for emergency phones. Leviathan protocol engaged. All units stand by for authentication. Blake's beer bottle was forgotten as he stared at the ring. That's not possible. Leviathan was terminated 6 years ago after the Syria operation went bad. Emma's smile held depths of knowledge that spoke to years of operating in shadows and half-truths. Leviathan was never terminated. It was compartmentalized, hidden, distributed across assets that could operate independently until the time came to reconvene. Hold on to your seats because we're about to witness something extraordinary. If this story is keeping you on the edge, share it with someone who needs to see that real power doesn't always announce itself. The reveal coming up will blow your mind. Tyler's phone was buzzing frantically with incoming alerts, but his attention was fixed on Emma as she continued her explanation. For 6 years, individual Leviathan assets have been tracking the intelligence leak that got our team killed. We've identified networks, followed money trails, documented corruption that reaches into the highest levels of military command. We? Blake asked. There are 12 of us left, scattered across different assignments, different identities, all working toward the same goal. Emma's voice carried the weight of years spent pursuing justice. Tonight was supposed to be the end of it, the final operation that would expose the entire network and bring down everyone involved. Hunter Gray had been listening with growing amazement. That's why the communications went down. That's why the lockdown happened. They knew you were about to move. They knew someone was getting close, but they thought it was Danny Rodriguez. Emma's expression hardened. They killed him to prevent him from uncovering evidence that could expose them. What they didn't realize was that Danny was working for us. The revelation hit Blake like a physical blow. Danny was Leviathan. Danny was our inside source. He'd been feeding us information about equipment sabotage, personnel assignments, operational security breaches. His death wasn't just murder, it was the elimination of our primary intelligence asset. Tyler was processing the implications with the rapid-fire analysis that had made him such an effective SEAL. If Danny was feeding you information, then you know exactly who's involved in the conspiracy. Emma nodded toward Mitchell's unconscious form. She was the operational coordinator, but she wasn't the decision-maker. Someone higher up the chain has been orchestrating this entire operation. Commander Stone stepped forward, his expression grave. Show them, Raven. Emma reached into her other pocket and produced a tablet computer that looked like nothing Blake had ever seen. The screen was larger than military standard. The casing was reinforced beyond normal specifications, and when she activated it, the interface showed classification levels that required congressional oversight to access. 6 years of investigation, Emma said, tapping through files that contained photographs, financial records, communication intercepts, and evidence documentation. Every transaction, every compromised operation, every American death that resulted from intelligence sold to hostile parties. The scope of the data was overwhelming. Blake saw names he recognized, operations he'd participated in, intelligence assessments that had shaped military policy for years. All of it compromised, all of it bought and sold like commodity goods. How many people died because of this? Tyler asked quietly. Emma's answer was simple and devastating. 217 confirmed. Probably more that we haven't identified yet. The number hung in the air like an indictment. 217 American service members killed not by enemy action, but by the deliberate betrayal of people they'd trusted with their lives. Blake's hands clenched into fists. Who's running it? Who's the head of this network? Emma looked at Commander Stone, who nodded grimly. Show them everything. Emma tapped the tablet screen, and a new file opened. What Blake saw there made his world tilt on its axis, because the photograph at the top of the file showed someone he'd served under, someone he'd respected, someone whose orders he'd followed without question. Admiral James Thornton, Emma said quietly, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, in command of SEAL Force deployment and operational planning for the past 8 years. Tyler's face went pale. Admiral Thornton signed the orders for tonight's training exercise. Admiral Thornton has been selling operational intelligence to foreign buyers for almost a decade. Every major SEAL operation for the past 8 years has been compromised before it began. We've been walking into ambushes, fighting enemies who knew our plans better than we did. The implications were staggering. Blake thought about missions that had gone wrong, operations that had taken heavier casualties than expected, intelligence failures that had resulted in American deaths. All of it suddenly made sense, in the most horrifying way possible. Madison had been listening with growing horror. You're saying that one of our own admirals has been deliberately getting people killed for money? I'm saying that Admiral Thornton has built a network of corrupt officials who've turned American military superiority into a profit center. They sell our operational plans, compromise our equipment, eliminate personnel who get too close to discovering their activities. Hunter Gray spoke up from his position near the door. Ma'am, accusations like that require proof that will stand up to congressional investigation. You're talking about bringing down someone with enough power to destroy anyone who threatens him. Emma's smile was sharp and dangerous. Mr. Gray, we didn't spend 6 years building a case just to see it dismissed on technicalities. We have everything: financial records, communication intercepts, video evidence, documented proof of specific operations that were sold to hostile parties. She tapped the tablet again, and the screen filled with bank records showing transfers of enormous sums of money from accounts linked to foreign intelligence services to domestic accounts controlled by military personnel. Thornton alone has received over $12 million in the past 5 years. Mitchell got $800,000. Chief Warrant Officer Kim received $600,000. Lieutenant Commander Peterson took $400,000. Tyler was studying the financial data with growing amazement. This is comprehensive. Bank records, tax documents, property purchases, investment portfolios. How did you get access to all of this? Leviathan operates with authorities that don't appear in any organizational chart, Emma replied. We have resources and capabilities that extend beyond normal military channels. Blake was staring at Mitchell's unconscious form with new understanding. She was going to kill everyone in here to protect this. She was going to try. Whether she would have succeeded? Emma shrugged. Let's just say that Leviathan assets are very difficult to eliminate. Commander Stone had been monitoring communications on his radio, and his expression was growing increasingly serious. Raven, we have a problem. Thornton's en route to the base. ETA 20 minutes. Emma's demeanor shifted, becoming harder and more focused. He knows the network is blown. He's coming to clean up loose ends personally. What kind of loose ends? Ashley asked. Emma's answer was chilling. Everyone in this room, everyone who knows about the investigation, everyone who could testify against him. Tyler's military training kicked in, and he found himself analyzing the tactical situation. If he's coming here with hostile intent, we need to evacuate civilians and establish defensive positions. There's nowhere to run, Emma said simply. Thornton has resources throughout this base. Security personnel, communications networks, command authority. He can lock down every building, cut off every escape route, eliminate every witness. Blake stood up, his grief and anger crystallizing into cold determination. Then we make our stand here. Emma studied his face, seeing something there that reminded her of the operators she'd led into impossible situations years earlier. Chief Brooks, this isn't your fight. You can walk away from this. Return to your unit. Continue your career. Pretend none of this ever happened. Blake's laugh was harsh and bitter. Danny Rodriguez was my partner, my friend. He died because he was trying to expose these people. Walking away isn't an option. Tyler nodded agreement. Count me in. If Admiral Thornton wants to clean up loose ends, he's going to find out that SEALs don't die quietly. Hunter Gray was checking his prosthetic leg, ensuring that it was properly locked in place for potential combat. Ma'am, I lost this leg fighting for my country. I'll be damned if I'm going to lose my life to someone who's been selling it out. Madison had retrieved a shotgun from behind the bar, checking to ensure it was loaded. This is my place. These are my customers. Nobody threatens my people. Emma looked around the room at faces that showed determination instead of fear, courage instead of panic. It reminded her of another time, another mission, when a small group of operators had faced impossible odds for the sake of something larger than themselves. All right, Emma said, her voice carrying the authority of command. If we're doing this, we do it right. Hunter, you and Madison coordinate civilian evacuation through the kitchen. There's a service tunnel that leads to Building 5. Blake and Tyler, help me establish defensive positions. Ashley stepped forward. What about me? Emma studied the security officer, seeing potential she hadn't noticed before. You're going to do what you do best, Lieutenant. You're going to coordinate with base security and make sure that when this is over, there are enough witnesses left alive to testify about what happened here. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of activity as the Seahawk was transformed from a recreational facility into a fortress. Tables were overturned to create cover. Emergency lighting was repositioned to create blind spots, and weapons were distributed to personnel who knew how to use them. Emma moved through the preparations with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. But Blake noticed that she kept checking her watch, as if she was waiting for something specific to happen. You're expecting backup, Blake observed. I'm expecting justice, Emma replied. The other Leviathan assets have been positioning themselves for months. When Thornton arrives, he's going to find himself facing more than he bargained for. Tyler was monitoring communications on his restored radio, tracking incoming traffic that painted a picture of base-wide confusion. Multiple units responding to conflicting orders, some personnel being told to secure the Seahawk, others being ordered to evacuate the area. It's like there are two different command structures operating simultaneously. Emma's smile was predatory. That's because there are. Thornton's network is trying to maintain control, but Leviathan has been systematically undermining their authority for months. Right now, nobody knows who to follow or what orders to obey. The chaos was deliberate, Emma explained. For 6 years, Leviathan assets had been placing themselves in key positions throughout the military hierarchy. Communications specialists who could redirect orders, intelligence analysts who could alter reports, administrative personnel who could modify official records. All of them working toward this moment when the network would be exposed and justice would finally be served. Blake was beginning to understand the scope of what Emma had orchestrated. You've been planning this for 6 years. Every assignment, every transfer, every operational detail, all of it building toward tonight. Tonight was always going to be the endgame. The moment when we revealed ourselves and brought down everyone involved in selling out American lives. Emma's expression hardened. The only question was whether we'd be bringing them to trial or to ground. Outside the Seahawk, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Not just 1 or 2 cars, but a convoy of military vehicles moving with the speed and purpose of a tactical assault force. Emma checked her tablet one final time, confirming that all systems were ready. "Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Thornton has arrived, and he's brought friends." Through the windows, Blake could see at least a dozen vehicles surrounding the building. Armed personnel were deploying with the precision of a special operations unit, taking positions that would allow them to control all approaches to the Seahawk. "That's not standard base security," Tyler observed grimly. "That's a private military contractor," Emma replied. "Personnel with no official connection to the U.S. military. Deniable assets who can eliminate witnesses without creating political complications." The reality of their situation was becoming clear. This wasn't going to be a military justice investigation or a congressional hearing. This was going to be a firefight with no rules and no survivors. But Emma didn't look worried. If anything, she seemed almost relieved that the waiting was over. "Chief Brooks," she said formally, "are you ready to find out who really killed your friend?" Blake's answer was simple and determined. "Yes, ma'am." Emma reached for her tablet one final time and activated a program that sent encrypted signals to 12 different locations around the world. In military bases, government offices, private security firms, and corporate headquarters, assets who'd been waiting for 6 years received the same message. Leviathan is active. Phoenix Protocol is go. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the globe, evidence files were simultaneously transmitted to news organizations, congressional offices, and international law enforcement agencies. Financial records, communication intercepts, operational documents, and witness testimonies flooded into official channels faster than they could be suppressed or contained. Emma's tablet showed confirmation signals from all 12 assets. Mission accomplished. Evidence delivered. Network exposed. "It's done," Emma announced. "Whether we survive the next hour or not, the truth is out there. Thornton's network is finished." But Admiral Thornton apparently had no intention of surrendering quietly. The voice that came over the Seahawk's PA system carried the authority of decades of military command. "This is Admiral James Thornton. You are ordered to surrender immediately and submit to military arrest." Emma picked up the microphone connected to the PA system. When she spoke, as her voice carried across the entire base. "This is Commander Raven Cross, Leviathan 9. Admiral Thornton, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of 217 American service members." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then Thornton's voice returned, colder and more dangerous. "Raven Cross died 6 years ago in Syria. Everyone knows that." Emma's smile was visible in her voice. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, Admiral, but reports of your corruption are about to become very public. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most significant moments in modern military history, not because of the tactics employed or the weapons used, but because of what it represented. The moment when the American military demonstrated that it would police itself, that honor and integrity were not just words in a mission statement. If this story gave you goosebumps, there are more incredible tales of hidden warriors waiting for you. Subscribe and hit that bell, because heroes walk among us every day, and their stories deserve to be told. The assault on the Seahawk began at exactly 2300 hours. Thornton's contractors moved with professional efficiency, using flashbang grenades and coordinated entry techniques designed to overwhelm resistance before it could organize. But they were not facing panicked civilians or unprepared security personnel. They were facing the carefully orchestrated response of people who'd had months to prepare for this exact scenario. Emma had positioned herself behind the main bar, using the solid mahogany construction as cover, while maintaining sight lines to all entrances. Her movements were fluid and economical, each shot precisely placed to disable rather than kill. She wasn't trying to win a firefight. She was buying time for the evidence to spread beyond the reach of suppression. Blake and Tyler worked as a team, using their SEAL training to maximum advantage in the confined space of the bar. They moved with the coordination of operators who'd trained together for years, covering each other's positions and communicating through hand signals that their attackers couldn't interpret. Hunter Gray had positioned himself near the kitchen entrance, his prosthetic leg providing stable bracing for accurate fire, while his experience told him exactly when to shoot and when to preserve ammunition. Madison coordinated the evacuation of remaining civilians while providing covering fire with her shotgun. Ashley had taken position at the secure communications console, maintaining contact with base security and ensuring that official records were being made of everything that happened. The contractors were skilled, but they were facing something they hadn't expected: a coordinated defense by people who knew the building intimately and had prepared specifically for this assault. What should have been a quick elimination of witnesses became a prolonged engagement that drew attention from across the base. That attention was exactly what Emma had wanted. Within minutes, legitimate base security forces were responding to reports of unauthorized weapons fire. Military police units were rolling toward the Seahawk with orders to restore order and investigate reports of armed intruders. News crews were being alerted by sources within the Leviathan network. Admiral Thornton found himself fighting a battle on multiple fronts: the physical assault on the Seahawk, the information war as evidence of his corruption spread across communication networks, and the political struggle as his authority was challenged by personnel loyal to constitutional rather than financial interests. The turning point came when Commander Stone arrived with a convoy of legitimate military personnel, flanked by FBI agents and congressional investigators who'd been briefed on the situation by Leviathan assets in Washington. Suddenly, Thornton's contractors found themselves facing not just the defenders inside the Seahawk, but a superior force of federal agents with legal authority to make arrests and conduct investigations. The firefight ended as abruptly as it had begun. Contractors who'd been shooting at Emma and her allies found themselves surrounded by FBI agents reading them their rights. Thornton himself was placed under military arrest by personnel from his own command, who'd been horrified to learn about his activities. Emma emerged from behind the bar, her uniform torn and her face showing the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying an impossible burden for too long. When Blake approached her, she was removing the Trident ring from the bar and sliding it back onto her finger where it belonged. "Is it over?" Blake asked. Emma looked around the Seahawk, seeing broken furniture, bullet holes in walls, and evidence of a battle that would be discussed in military schools for decades to come. "This part is over. The investigation will take years. The trials will be lengthy and complex. But the network is broken." Tyler was monitoring communications, watching as reports flowed in from around the world. The evidence dumps worked. News organizations are already running stories. Congressional committees are announcing investigations. International allies are expressing concern about intelligence sharing. The scope of the revelation was staggering. Thornton's network hadn't just compromised American operations, it had affected Allied forces, international cooperation, and global security initiatives. The investigation would eventually span multiple countries and involve dozens of agencies. But for Emma, the most important outcome was much simpler. Danny Rodriguez's death had been avenged, and the people responsible for selling out American lives were finally being held accountable. Madison was surveying the damage to her bar with the resignation of someone who'd seen military personnel destroy property before. "Well, this is going to take some explaining to the insurance company." Emma approached her, pulling a business card from her pocket. "The expenses will be covered. Full restoration, plus compensation for lost business. You and your staff showed courage tonight. That won't be forgotten." Hunter Gray was checking his prosthetic leg for damage, ensuring that it was still functional despite the evening's activities. "Ma'am, I've got to ask, what happens to people like us, civilians who got caught up in this?" Emma's answer was both reassuring and sobering. "You'll be debriefed by federal agents. You'll sign non-disclosure agreements about certain operational details. You'll be asked to testify in proceedings that may take years to complete. And you'll be under protection until we're certain that all elements of the network have been neutralized." Ashley had been coordinating with incoming investigators, providing them with preliminary reports and evidence documentation. "Commander Cross, the FBI wants to conduct formal interviews with all witnesses. How much can we tell them?" "Everything. The time for secrets is over." Emma's voice carried the finality of someone closing a chapter of her life. The Leviathan's mission was to expose this network and bring the responsible parties to justice. Mission accomplished. Blake was studying Emma's face, seeing something there that spoke to his own need for closure. "What about you? What happens to the ghost who solved the case?" Emma's smile was sad and tired, and infinitely relieved. "The ghost gets to stop haunting people, gets to remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just surviving." Commander Stone approached, carrying official documentation that would formally restore Emma's legal identity and military status. "Raven, the Joint Chiefs want to see you. Full briefing, complete operational review, discussion of future assignments." Emma took the papers, but she didn't look at them immediately. Instead, she was staring at the Trident ring on her finger, remembering the 5 operators who'd died in Syria, and the 6 years she'd spent ensuring their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "Future assignments," she repeated thoughtfully. "I think I've had enough of living in shadows. It's time to remember what it feels like to serve in the light." Tyler was still monitoring communications, tracking the global response to the evidence revelations. "Ma'am, there's something you should know. Other networks are going active. Leviathan wasn't the only program tracking corruption in military and intelligence communities." Emma looked up sharply. "Phoenix Protocol?" "Phoenix Protocol has been activated. Assets are moving worldwide. This wasn't just about bringing down Thornton's network. It was about exposing corruption throughout the entire defense and intelligence establishment." The implications were staggering. Emma had thought she was concluding a 6-year mission of revenge and justice. Instead, she'd apparently triggered a much larger operation that would reshape American national security for decades to come. Her secure phone rang, displaying an encrypted number she hadn't seen in years. When she answered, the voice on the other end was familiar. "Raven, this is Phoenix 1. Congratulations on completing your mission. We need to talk." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of new responsibilities settling on her shoulders. "How soon?" "Tonight. There are 12 other networks that we've identified. The work is just beginning." Emma looked around the Seahawk one final time, seeing faces of people who'd been willing to risk everything for the sake of truth and justice. Blake, Tyler, Hunter, Madison, Ashley, all of them had chosen to stand up when it mattered, to fight for something larger than themselves. "I'll be there," Emma said into the phone. "But Phoenix? This time we do it in the open. No more ghosts, no more shadows. If we're going to clean house, we do it where everyone can see." The voice on the other end was amused. "Understood, Raven. Welcome to the new paradigm." As federal agents began processing the scene and conducting interviews, Emma walked outside into the cool San Diego evening. The base was buzzing with activity as news of the operation spread. But she found a quiet moment to remember Danny Rodriguez and the other Americans who'd died because someone had turned their service into profit. Blake followed her outside, still processing everything that had happened. "Commander, I have to ask, how do you live with carrying that kind of knowledge? Knowing what you know, seeing what you've seen?" Emma's answer was simple and profound. "You find something worth fighting for, and you never stop fighting. You remember that honor isn't just a word. It's a choice you make every day, regardless of the cost." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a second Trident ring, this one inscribed with D. Rodriguez, L12. Danny earned this before he died. He was going to be read into Leviathan after tonight's operation was complete. Emma placed the ring in Blake's hand. "He would have wanted you to carry on his work. There are more networks out there, more corruption to expose, more lives to save. The question is whether you're willing to step into the shadows to protect the light." Blake stared at the ring, understanding the weight of what Emma was offering. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was an invitation to join something larger than himself, something that would require sacrifices he couldn't imagine. "What would it mean?" Blake asked. "It would mean leaving behind everything you think you know about military service. It would mean operating in spaces that don't officially exist, fighting enemies who wear friendly uniforms, making decisions that could save thousands of lives, or get you killed." Blake thought about Danny, about the corruption they'd uncovered, about the 217 Americans who died because someone had sold them out. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Where do I sign?" Blake said. Emma's smile was the first genuinely happy expression Blake had seen from her all evening. "You don't sign anything, you just decide every day that some things are worth dying for, and then you make sure you live long enough to protect them." As they stood outside the Seahawk, watching federal agents and military investigators work through the night to document everything that had happened, Emma's phone rang one final time. The number was different from before, but the voice was equally familiar. "Ghost 7. This is Phoenix Command. We have a situation developing in Moscow. International intelligence sharing has been compromised. We need assets on the ground within 48 hours. Emma looked at Blake, seeing in his eyes the same determination she'd carried for 6 years. "Phoenix Command? This is Ghost 7. I have a new team member who needs rapid certification. How soon can we move? How soon can you be ready?" Emma glanced at the Seahawk, where the last evidence of their battle was being documented and processed. She thought about the 6 years she'd spent hunting Thornton's network, about the friends she'd lost and the enemies she'd defeated. She thought about the corruption that still existed in dark corners of the defense establishment, about the Americans who were still in danger because someone was selling out their operations. Most of all, she thought about Danny Rodriguez, about the ring Blake now wore, about the promise she'd made to never let her teammates down. "Phoenix Command," Emma said, her voice carrying the authority of command and the certainty of purpose. "Ghost 7 is ready for immediate deployment." As federal vehicles began leaving the base and the initial chaos of the investigation settled into the methodical work of building cases and preparing prosecutions, Emma Mitchell, Commander Raven Cross, Ghost 7, Leviathan 9, walked back toward the Seahawk one final time. The building would be repaired, The story would be told, and the truth would eventually emerge in all its complexity. But for Emma, the most important outcome was much simpler. She was no longer alone in the shadows. She had a team again, a mission that mattered, and a cause worth fighting for. The ghost had found her way home. And somewhere in Moscow, a new chapter of the story was already beginning. "Gentlemen," Emma said, looking at Blake and Tyler and the others who'd chosen to stand with her. "Leviathan was just the beginning. Welcome to Phoenix Protocol. Let's go save the world." The night air carried the sound of helicopters approaching, not with hostile intent this time, but to extract assets for immediate deployment to the next theater of operations. Emma smiled as she walked toward the landing zone, her team falling into formation behind her. After 6 years of hunting in shadows, she was finally back where she belonged, leading warriors into impossible situations for the sake of something larger than themselves. The ghost had become human again, but she was still every bit as dangerous as she'd ever been, and her war was far from over.